I'm Brian Nitz. I'm here from Sun Microsystems Ireland, the desktop group. I work in desktop QA, and happy to be here at the OS DevCon. It's nice to be in Dresden. I'm here to talk about Source Juicer, OpenSolaris Source Juicer. So, software, it's fantastic, it's wonderful, it's magical. We all love it. That's why we're all here. But it breaks. Why does that happen? This was the last 2 times I went to the US. I took these Airbus, Aer Lingus Airbus 330s. I live in Ireland. I'm from the US. And they have this nice multimedia system in the back of the seats with video games and movies and all this kind of thing. And my daughter, in the middle of watching a Charlie Brown cartoon, decided she wanted something else. And apparently the testers of the system never foresaw that anyone would ever want to do that. So it crashed, and we saw the Linux boot sequence going on our back seats, and then we looked around us, and everyone else on the plane got the same screen. So I don't know for a fact if we've caused this or not, and I apologize right now that I wasn't able to take a clear picture. Otherwise, we could debust. Maybe debug the software that's running on the Airbus 330. You never know. But anyway, why does it break? Well, actually, it works for me, and it does. I mean, we're developers. Stuff just tends to work for us. And I'm in the QA team, and I try to kind of balance sometimes being the QA guy and being a developer. It's really difficult to balance that. Because stuff works for developers. So what's so different about developers? So look around, when we look around the city here of Dresden, can we find our group in crowds? Is it a little bit easier to see us? I mean, are we that different? I don't know. I mean, maybe we are different, but I like it that way. I mean, I think if we change things so that we weren't different, so that we behave like users and did goofy things like stop a Snoopy cartoon in the middle or something like that, I don't think that would really work out very well. I think the real problem, though, isn't so much that we're different, but that in some cases our development process, our development environment is different from everyone else's. Our user is running our software on a PC that probably doesn't have any developer libraries, it doesn't have any developer tools, and we're doing our own thing here. Actually, it's a little bit more complicated than that. So each of us developers, I mean, we have this guy has this version of this compiler and that version of this lib, and these guys are operating their sausage factory, and that guy's got a dual processor Commodore 64. And he says it works for him twice as good on that, and Spark works and all this. Does anyone do development on these iPhones? I've seen a lot of these things around today. No, I think Apple actually doesn't want you to do development on this thing. They want you to do it on their expensive stuff that you have to buy along with it. They don't really want you to develop on this. But more and more people are moving from laptops and PCs to netbooks and these kind of things. And they really don't make for a very good development platform in some ways. This particular laptop almost can't handle very much before the fan comes on. So actually, it's even a little bit more complicated than this. Everyone's running on a different code base, possibly. I mean, I've updated this Friday, and if it crashes, that's the reason anyway. But so there's just the problem that we have. Whenever you want to build a development environment, you have your own PC and you want to build in a development environment there, and it's going to be different from everyone else's development environment, and all of those are going to be different from Mr. User. So he's not going to be happy because you give him this software and you say it works perfectly for me, it doesn't work for him. So I wonder if we could put some of that complexity up in the cloud. Is that a good idea? Don't know if I can talk about the word cloud here. Is too much of a buzzword? I mean, yeah, I think that was a buzzword last week. Maybe it's expired now. So if you don't like clouds, I don't know. I live in Ireland, so we like clouds. There's clouds all over the place there. But, standardize the build environment in a web service so that all your developers are kind of singing to the same hymn sheet is how they say it in Ireland. So what is Open Solaris Source Juicer? It's a community interface for contributing to Open Solaris. And it's intended to lower the barrier to contribution. We don't want to make it hard. We don't want to force people to buy expensive hardware and expensive development tools and things like that to be able to contribute to Open Solaris. We want to make as many people be able to do that as possible. And it's scalable. There's two main components. There's the web application, the user interface to the thing, and build grid, which is the build system. And it's available right now at juicer.opensolaris.org. Let me just start out talking a little bit about our package release model. For something to get into Solaris release, there's quite a long process of various levels of QA and legal review and things like that. But most of us are out here in the world, developers world, where we see something cool and we just want to get it started on this process so that maybe someday it'll get up to this point. But we just want to get it built so it's available to other people, maybe other developers or other people to review it. And that's the pending repository. That's the first step onto this kind of ladder or pyramid of getting software into Solaris release. So Source Juicer takes in spec files. Copyright, we have a legal requirement to have a copyright in there, so the minimum you need a copyright, spec files, either tarballs or pointers to tarballs, and patches. You submit these into Source Juicer. Someone has to validate that this copyright isn't just like your mom's dumpling recipe or something. You know, a few things here have to be actually have a human check it and just make sure that you're not just submitting garbage there. And once it's validated, it automatically tries to build it. And if it builds okay, it tries to install it. And if the install works okay, it publishes it to pending, where other people can look at it, review it, install it, comment on it, and vote on it. And then eventually it can get promoted to contrib. And that's actually a long way towards getting it useful, into supported releases. So the components of Source Juicer are Open Solaris, and it makes good use of zones and ZFS. I'll show you a little bit more of that in maybe another slide. We use the Django Python framework, which this was actually my first experience with that, and I really like it. It's a good model. It really separates well the user interface code from the underlying model, data model. And it also kind of separates. I didn't have to have my nice, pretty code have all kinds of weird SQL stuff in the code. I mean, it separates that out really nicely also. He uses the version management. Now, I think we're going to work in Mercurial also. And a web, standard Apache web server and database. And the Open Solaris authentication framework, I'll just show you. I'll log in. Maybe I'm already logged in, actually. And then the Open Solaris desktop CBE, common build environment. We found that on the desktop team, we have a lot of this GNOME software that we're trying to build, and a lot of it needs standard tools that we just needed available. Maybe standard versions of compilers or standard, let's see, maybe make or gmake config and all this kind of stuff. And then Sun Studio is part of it. So this is kind of a drawing of what I just talked about here. So you can submit a spec file to the web app, and then using the Django, it talks to the database, and how's that happen? Yeah. So there's a connection in here also with Subversion, so that the stuff that you're submitting it is submitted into Subversion. Buildmaster looks at it, does a Subversion update, and then it submits it to BuildGrid. BuildGrid tries to build it. Here's a look. I'm going to just skip these right now, and we'll go straight to a demo in a few minutes. Let me just skip these at the moment. So if you want to submit something to Source Juicer, you need a spec file, which is a build recipe to a particular piece of software. And package build is something that Laszlo Peter wrote that takes spec files that are pretty much to the same standard as the spec files you would see on SUSE Linux or Red Hat Linux. And it understands those, and it uses those to build Solaris packages. And one update he made recently is to make, it used to make SVR4 packages, now it makes IPS packages also. As I said, we have a legal requirement for copyrights, and then any patches or any of these other things, you can submit also patches, man pages, spec files. But as a very minimum, you do one spec file, one copyright. So let's have a look at a spec file. I don't know if anyone here was here for Thomas's spec tutorial on building. We're gonna, yeah. If we have time after this, he can maybe go through a little bit more in detail in spec files. How many are familiar with spec files anyway? So a fair number anyway. One of the things the reviewer of a package looks at is make sure that the name makes sense, make sure it's in the right group so that the package manager knows to put it in the right place. Make sure that the URL to the community is good so that that metadata gets in the package. And let me look at the second part. The second part of the spec file is the stuff that actually builds it. So these are the commands. A lot of these macros do some things like they'll untar the tarball. This is something you probably have to just look at a reference and see what each of these macros do. Like, I think that one untars name, and then it build might already do a configure make or something like that in there. So what Source Juicer's build process does is it assigns a job to an available zone. And I really like this feature. I mean, it really does make good use of ZFS and zones. What I was talking about earlier, the problem you have with everyone having a different version of everything, slightly different versions of libraries and stuff. What we start with is, well, right now, the version we have right now is OpenSolaris 0906. So we start with a zone that's just that. It's just a blank OpenSolaris 0906. And what that means, I don't know if I have it in here, build requires, that means all this stuff has to be defined properly. Now, in the past, you might have been able to get away with, for your own self, maybe you have the developer libraries that are needed for this. And so if you're building on your platform and you don't have this defined properly, all of the things that are required for the install, it might just work for you. But because Source Juicer starts with a blank zone, and it actually installs all the packages that it sees in build requires or requires, it installs those packages during the build process, you guarantee that if the build works, then all of that metadata is defined properly. And then, yeah, we use ZFS rollback to get the zone back to its initial state. So that saves some time. You're not like copying, moving stuff around. What ZFS does is it only moves data when it needs to, when there's a difference, you know. So it logs into the build zone. Source Juicer logs into the build zone, does a SVN update to grab anything new, like the spec file that you just submitted. The sources are pulled down into the build environment in the zone. And then, like I said, the tools and dependencies are all installed based on your spec file. And then package build builds the packages. If the build fails, the logs are saved. Otherwise, package build publishes them to a build repo. And if tries to install it itself. And if it doesn't install okay, then it actually, again, you get a log message. It's available from the web interface. Otherwise, if the test install worked, then it publishes to the pending repository. So from that point on, anyone who has a pending repository in their list of package authorities or package publishers can install that package that you just created. So I'm going to try to do a demo here using Source Juicer. The web address is juicer.opensolaris.org, JUCOR for Juicer, short. And the initial page just tells you a little bit about Source Juicer, but I'm going to start out with the submit page because I'm going to pretend like I'm submitting a brand new spec file. It asks me to log in. Okay. I'm going to pick something really dirt simple just because it builds quick and I can just show you that, and I'll also show you install of something else. So I have some spec files somewhere in my home directory. Like I said, as a minimum, it needs the spec file and the copyright. This particular spec file needs a couple of patches also. So
you have 2 spec files.
Okay. I think that should be okay. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to submit this to Source Juicer. And one of the first things that has to happen is someone has to validate it to say that it's okay, it's got the right stuff in it. So let me just go to the review tab, and I'll look for that job. Oh, there it is right there. And I don't know, it almost looks like 4 jobs get in just in the past minute or so. One thing that's happened in the past week, if anyone's been using Source Juicer and noticed a whole lot of jobs from RoboPorter, I'll talk a little bit about RoboPorter in a few minutes. But earlier in the week, a guy named Doug Levitt, who works on a different team at Sun, submitted something like 500 jobs from RoboPorter. So you'll see a lot of jobs like that in the interface. So here's the review page for that job that I just submitted. It shows all the files in it. There's a diff to show you the difference between the previous version and things like that. The option to withdraw the submission if you notice that someone else has the same package, for instance, and you want to just say, nah, let's get rid of mine.